is this triad that I'm talking about here. So we've got our liver in the upper left, we've got our pancreas in the upper right, and this lovely, lovely iron molecule, okay, the mineral in our diets. So much connection between all three of these, right? And by the end of this podcast, we're going to know enough about all three of these to know how they do what they do, how they interact with one another, and in a dysfunctional state, who we get to point the finger at for what's going wrong, okay? So we have to know the players, right? And I've covered plenty on what the liver does. This is just a kind of a quick overview to make sure that we have a basic understanding of the liver's role as it specifically relates to managing iron in the body. And then we'll kind of connect the dots with iron itself as a molecule and its role in the body, as well as the pancreas. So the liver, it is the site, it is the management, the throughway of iron in the body, right? So when most people think of iron, they think of its role in hemoglobin, right? It is the major oxygen carrier on red blood cells that delivers oxygen throughout the body, right? So you can see there 80% of iron in the body is connected to hemoglobin delivering oxygen, okay? That being said, the liver doesn't just filter the red blood cells, right? It is storing iron, right? So it is taking the iron off of those recycled red blood cells and it is distributing it throughout the body where it is needed. Now, where does it go? Most of it is going back to the bone marrow where red blood cells are being made so that iron can bind to those new red blood cells to kind of continue that life cycle all over again. Our body is incredibly efficient at recycling iron. About 95% of the iron in our body is being reused and reused over and over again, with only, 5% being excreted via feces, sweat, urine, what have you. But very efficient system, and all of it runs through the liver, all right? So for the iron that's not being sent to the bone marrow to be sent and reattached to the red blood cells, it can be sent to cells where it is being used for cellular respiration. And we'll talk later on about how iron is used in the electron transport chain to create energy in the cell, in the mitochondria. So it's either sent to the cell, or it can be sent to the GI tract, or the kidneys, or the skin, or the lungs, to be honest, to be excreted and removed, right? And like I said, our body's incredibly efficient with iron. And because it's so efficient, we really only have the capability to get rid of so much. So we're able to excrete anywhere from 1 to 2 milligrams per day of iron. Now, for anything that's not being used actively or excreted because it's run its course and it's gone, that remains in the liver for storage, right? So the liver is ground zero for anything to do with iron. It's where things are recycled. It's where things are repurposed. It's where things are stored. So if you want to know about iron status, or if there's any sort of dysregulation in terms of iron, you need to know what's going on at the liver, because that's where things are happening. And when it comes to mapping out dysfunction specifically, you have to know what else is connected to the liver. And because the liver is so multifaceted in what it's able to do, it is very well connected in other organ systems, okay? So the liver secretes hormones. Therefore, it's connected in the endocrine system, okay? So it has a direct line to the pancreas. It has a direct line to the rest of the endocrine system. So everywhere from the brain and the pituitary, the thymus, the thyroid, all the way down to your gonads, the testes and the ovaries. Okay, so it's distributing hormones via the endocrine system. Okay, it secretes bile. It stores fat-soluble vitamins and other minerals. I believe magnesium's in there as well. So it has a role in the digestive system and digesting fats and processing vitamins and minerals, right? So that, I mean, map out the digestive system. That's your esophagus, your stomach, your intestines, your colon, your kidneys, the excretory system. Okay, that's the kidneys again. It has so many ties to so many systems. It is so deeply rooted in so many important bodily functions that when you are dealing with liver dysfunction, it leaves such a huge crater in its wake, right? Because liver dysfunction, if the liver is not able to do what it needs to do in any way, it is upsetting the endocrine system, it's upsetting the digestive system, and it's upsetting the excretory system. Okay, so you've got these neat little pictures here. We've got the pancreas here connected to the small intestine, the mouth of the small intestine there. The pancreas is also a digestive organ that has a role in breaking down food as well. So it's the liver in all of that would be right above and right over the pancreas, with the gallbladder kind of hanging off the side there. So all next door neighbors. You know, if you're thinking of all these organs, they are all very close together. And then expanding on the results of liver dysfunction downstream within all of those symptoms. You think of all the organs and tissues that are involved, like I just mentioned. What are the things going on in those systems that are affected by our autoimmune conditions, by our chronic inflammatory conditions, right? People having their gallbladder taken out, PCOS, infertility, Hashimoto's and the thyroid, diabetes, and fibrotic buildup in beta cells, a loss of beta cell mass, a loss of insulin sensitivity, blocked bile ducts. With the fibrotic gallbladders, all of these things are so closely related to the liver. And all we're doing right now is looking at each of these symptoms in isolation without understanding their common connection upstream at the liver. So food for thought. We'll connect the dots. All right. So next player in that triad is iron itself, the iron molecule. Okay. So we know where it's being stored. It's, the liver is kind of the main site where it's being handled, because it is an incredibly important mineral. Okay. So it is a proton donor and acceptor. That is what makes it such a great oxygen carrier on hemoglobin. It binds readily with oxygen because oxygen is equally as reactive. So a match made in heaven there. If it's not dealing with oxygen, it is being a catalyst in the electron transport chain, donating and accepting electrons in order for mitochondria to create energy. Okay, so no matter where iron goes, whether it's on hemoglobin with oxygen or it's in the electron transport chain creating energy, it is so incredibly reactive. It has a high potential for energy exchange. Now, when you think of that and you see that reactivity of iron, it has to get you curious about, okay, it's like It's like an electric charge. You have to make sure you're handling this thing with gloves so that you're not getting electrocuted, right? And when you look at the body's transport system for iron and safety mechanisms built around iron, you understand that the body knows how reactive iron is. I'm tempted to say dangerous, because iron is dangerous if it is used out of context. So we'll see that the body has built-in defense mechanisms to prevent iron going places where it is not supposed to, because as we'll learn, the consequences are dire. So this is from a 2018 paper, or 2016 paper, sorry, going over the role that iron has in mitochondria, right? So this paper is a little bit of a meta-analysis, kind of going over some of the existing questions in how iron is being used in the mitochondria. This particular paper was very specific in the chemistry of the outer mitochondrial membrane, the inner mitochondrial membrane. For the purposes of this podcast, we're not going to talk about specific electrons being donated, the pyruvates and the citric acid cycle going on in each mitochondria. Rest assured that iron is a vital component in the effective transfer of energy going on in every mitochondria. Okay, so as you can see here, iron is a key player in many important cellular processes, including energy metabolism, cellular respiration, and DNA synthesis. Mitochondria are major hubs of iron utilization and accumulation, and iron in the mitochondria functions as a cofactor in iron-sulfur cluster-containing proteins, heme-containing proteins, and iron ion-containing proteins. So, needless to say, iron is a permanent resident in mitochondria. VIP, very important, much needed, and always being used to some degree in creating energy. And this is just a brief illustration, like your kind of classic textbook demonstration of the electron transport chain. I'll give you a second to look it over, but it's not too hard to find iron, right? There it is, right? It's so readily accepting and donating electrons there. So you see that going through redox reactions, complex 1, complex 2, and complex 3 of the electron transport chain. So it's multiple roles, and this is all going on within the mitochondria of your cells. So let's go on to the last player here, the beta cells. So this is one of, I want to say 6, but 4 main cell types within the pancreas, okay? It's responsible for secreting both insulin and amylin. For the purposes of this podcast, we're going to talk mostly about its role in secreting insulin. Insulin is secreted as glucose is absorbed by the small intestine. So we ingest our food that has carbs in it. Once it hits our small intestine, it's going to affect our blood sugar. And when our blood sugar starts to raise, right, because our blood is taking that sugar and getting ready to distribute it throughout the body, our pancreas releases insulin into the bloodstream that acts as kind of like a key, for a lock and key to get the glucose into the cell. Without insulin, the glucose remains in the blood and is unable to get into the cell to be used for energy, right? Now, that last point there, it's necessary for efficient cellular uptake of glucose. Now, there are alternative ways for glucose to get into the cell, but they are incredibly inefficient, and insulin is the preferred hormone for getting that done. Okay, now Not a lot of diabetics know that, honestly. They think, well, if unless it's insulin, glucose isn't getting into the cell, and that's not necessarily true. But to remain healthy and to effectively regulate your blood sugar to a healthy level, you're going to need insulin for what you're eating.